All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks to Craig and Maureen. Very much appreciate being invited here. And so this part of the presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of what we see in the venture healthcare arena, sort of focusing on device and biotech, talking about ophthalmology as well. And then that'll transition to a panel with some investors. We'll talk about what's going on out in the market, good and bad. So maybe with that, I'll sort of dive in and just who I am and what I do. I'm at HSBC, which is a UK-based bank. I was at Silicon Valley Bank for 17 years, sort of managing the healthcare venture world and doing the reports that we put on semi-annually. And then a group of 42 of us left in April to join HSBC to basically take the ethos of what we did at SVB and apply it to a brand new division of HSBC. So if you're thinking about commercial banking or venture debt and want to talk to me, please seek me out. But again, we do this report twice a year. And so with that, let's sort of jump in to the next slide. So first slide sort of looks at the venture capital investment in healthcare, both in the US and Europe, by sector. There's a couple of takeaways, and I have the data through Q3. I'm sort of getting all this stuff together for the year-end report, so I figured I'd share all the data that I have. What's interesting to me is, one, yes, we're off 40% versus what we saw in 2022, but really, I think what I'm seeing in both biopharma and device is really a stability of dollars going in. And you can sort of see that around the green rectangles around those different sectors. But why are these dollars down? Well, a couple reasons. One is that a lot of the deals that we're seeing in 2023 are insider sort of add-on rounds. So these are companies that maybe haven't quite hit the milestones that they were looking to hit, or just based on new investors not being as interested or active, they're raising an inside round with the existing investors. Those tend to be smaller deals than what you typically do for outside-led rounds. And then secondly, over the last few years, you saw a lot of IPOs. So there were a lot of these mezzanine rounds. So basically really big dollars coming in to prep a company to go IPO. Obviously, IPO market is not as active as we've seen in the past. So again, less of those deals equals less dollars that are actually going into the sector. But if you actually look at the trajectory of the second half of 2022, we're very much similar to that trajectory in 2023. So, with that, let's sort of jump into sort of biopharma first. And this sort of gives you a sense of, by indication, where are the dollars going so far in 2023? A couple things here. When you look at the ones that are outlined in red, these are sort of the sectors or indications that are down versus what we saw in 2022. A lot less investment in platform, which are really early stage deals. And I think that's a function of the IPO market being a lot harder to get, and the fact that investors really want to see clinical data to fund that Series B. Oncology down significantly from last year, but really at the same pace of second half of 2022, and orphan rare is down as well. The only bright spot really is neuro, and these are mostly clinical stage deals that we're seeing. But what's really interesting is ophthalmology, pretty solid numbers if you look at the ophthalmology outlined in yellow, but there's another $300 million of that's in orphan rare. So if you add that into ophthalmology, it really becomes the fifth biggest category within biopharma, which is really great to see. So the activity there, I think, is really strong. And if we go into looking at the type of deals that we're seeing in biopharma, again, sort of going back to the fact that a lot of these companies are really having trouble finding that new investor at a valuation that sort of fits. And so you're seeing a lot of these insider rounds. And this is what I'm sort of trying to look at with this slide. The lighter color is actually a new investor-led round. The darker orange is an add-on or insider round. And you can see it's fairly 50-50. And in normal times, 70% of the deals that you see on a quarterly basis are going to be new investor-led deals. So the fact is, we continue to see folks continue to have insiders coming and supporting their company. The question really becomes, what happens when those insider rounds are up and they have to think about valuation reset. But it's interesting to see, the platform oncology deals are getting most of the new investor-led rounds. I do think when you look at ophthalmology, way more insider rounds than overall. But of the 7 new deals, 4 of the 7 were Series A deals coming off of institutional seeds. So actually, it's really interesting to see a lot of early stage progress for ophthalmology. And specifically within ophthalmology, just to give you a sense of the bigger deals that we saw so far in 2023, I sort of labeled it out, in terms of deal size. And a couple things sort of come up to my mind. One, early rounds really are dominating. A lot of Series A activity in ophthalmology. 2, a lot of gene and cell therapy focus in this arena. 3, also, which is a little surprising to me, knowing where we've seen ophthalmology go in biopharma, a lot of preclinical activity, a lot of big rounds and preclinical opportunities. Again, really interesting. And then lastly, a good mix of investors that we're seeing in this sector. So feeling pretty good about the activity that we're seeing in biopharma. And so with that as sort of one side of the ball, let's take a look at medtech, which is the other side of the ophthalmology world. And here, what's interesting to me is the stability of medtech versus biotech is very interesting. I think when I think about medtech, I really sort of think steady Eddie in terms of both the exits, but just the pace of investment. And it's interesting to see sort of some of the bigger categories like neuro and surgical, or orthopedic, imaging, all actually holding pretty solidly versus what we saw in 2022. Not as much activity in cardiovascular. They still do some deals. NIM, which is non-invasive monitoring, sort of sensor-based technology, is off as well. But what's interesting to see is we're not seeing sort of the exciting, aggressive investment in ophthalmology as we are on the biotech side in medtech. So it's fairly down. It's of interest, but just less activity here. And if we look at similar slides around insider round financing, again, yes, we're seeing at about 50-50. Actually, a pretty sharp decrease in Q3 in the number of new deals that are being done. And where I think about within the device sector, most of the insider rounds tend to be companies that are pursuing 510K indication, which is basically there's a predicate device after. You typically don't need a lot of clinical trials. But I think you have a lot of companies that are sort of stuck in getting clearance, getting out into the market, and the commercialization efforts. They need to hit a certain level to really get acquisition interest. And so we're seeing a lot of inside rounds to just keep that company going. Hopefully they can hit that mark that'll get that acquirer to be interested. Q3 update, as I said, a little bit less on the new investment side. And then ophthalmology, which, surprising to me, 9 of the 13 deals were actually led by new investors. So while you do see not as much activity in biopharma versus biopharma, the deals that we did see in medtech, a lot of them had new investors coming into the deal. And then finally, before our panelists come up, taking a look at the financings that we saw in medtech, you can see obviously the size of the financings much smaller in medtech than we see in biopharma. But again, a couple things here. One, in biopharma, we saw a lot of Series A activity. In medtech, we're seeing a lot of later stage activity in ophthalmology. The investor syndicate, very diverse, but we do see some of these late stage growth investors, as well as some of the biopharma investors that are interested in ophthalmology, sort of go into more of the drug delivery side, which I think is interesting. And then all of the larger financings that are on this list have new investors coming in and leading around. So again, really good news just from the perspective of when the new investor comes in, one, that is new money coming in, but also reserves to continue to support the company. So important for the industry as we sort of move forward.